My name is Wright. I am the voice of reason. I speak for the Last Crusade.
When men have no foes, they fight phantoms. We live in an age obsessed with glass ceilings, dog whistles, and microaggressions. Note what these have in common. The glass ceiling is the alleged invisible barrier which prevents women from being promoted into positions of top management, and which bars her from highest levels of power. Dog whistles are the alleged inaudible messages sent as code from one racist to another over public airwaves to coordinate and perpetuate their continued oppression of blacks. Microaggressions are the alleged impalpable assaults subtly hidden as thoughtless comments or discourteous gestures. Microaggressions are just like various other forms of assault and battery, such as being lacerated, stabbed, drowned, bloodied, bruised, bludgeoned, or beaten senseless, except that these aggressions are so microscopically slight and insignificant that no one, not even the alleged perpetrator, can detect them. Even the alleged victim will not feel them unless told and trained to do so. For example, asking someone where he is from is a microaggression, as this betrays an unconscious racism which oppresses the weak. Using the pronoun he when grammar calls for it also oppresses the weak. In a recent news cycle, taking a test at college, doing math, or having a daughter who wears a Disney princess costume of a Polynesian at Halloween are all forms of oppression. What these three have in common is that all are phantoms. Now, obviously, no one can take these claims with even the slightest degree of seriousness. Even on their own terms, they make no sense. If a woman is frustrated with the promotion offered to her in her current career, let her change jobs or start her own business. Either you have the skill and drive and talent needed to win for yourself the high position you desire, or you do not. If you do, there is no need to wait for someone else to remove the alleged invisible barrier keeping you from the high position. And if you do not, then being given the position as a gift will not give you the skill and drive and talent needed to face real adversity, a union riot, or an antitrust lawsuit, which fortune might then place between you and any further success. Likewise, either the alleged oppressors have the power to oppress blacks, or not. If they have the power, they would not bother to speak in whispers and coded messages. If they lack the power, the whispers and coded messages can be safely ignored, for then no one is being oppressed. Likewise for microaggressions. If someone innocently offers you an undiscernibly small insult, and you are in a position to demand the innocent to apologize, you have power over him, not he over you. You are the Grand Inquisitor here, and he is the heretic in chains. If he actually had the motive, opportunity, and the power to oppress you, there would be coercion involved. The water fountains would be marked colored and white. The governors would stand in schoolhouse doors. Police in riot gear with fire hoses and attack dogs, armed guards, and death camps surrounded with barbed wire would be present, as would the whole visible apparatus of the state. The alleged oppressors here do not actually have the power to oppress, or to do anything visible. Far from being able to call upon armed men in riot gear to enforce Democrat-style Jim Crow laws, in America these days, anyone accused of racism, misogyny, or thoughtlessness to the hypersensitive feelings of any mascot of the left is liable for social opprobrium, ostracization, loss of livelihood, and civil or even criminal penalties. In Europe, criminal penalties face those caught voicing wrong-think opinions on social media. The most that can be said for the leftist narrative about glass ceilings, dog whistles, and whispered non-insults is that the perpetrators, if they exist at all, are not more than a scattered, demoralized, and decimated remnant of a once proud segregationist and slave-owning political party now fallen, who comfort themselves by nursing a sullen resentment at their loss of power to oppress blacks and women. For the record, the aforementioned slave-owning political party now fallen would be the party of racist Jefferson Davis, John C. Calhoun, Orville Faubus, George Wallace, Nathan Bedford Forrest, Robert C. Byrd, the party of the homophobe Fred Phelps, and the party of women abusers Bill Clinton, Harvey Weinstein, and so on. Please note that there are careers in which a whispered campaign of lies can derail or kill a career, and where anonymous accusations bring on a witch hunt. Obviously, any field where there is a clear and obvious way of judging the merit of a man's performance is not open to whisper campaigns. But in fields such as the theater, or academics, or politics, where one's position can insulate one from the results of incompetence, such whispers would be all-powerful. Anyone who has ever been on the receiving end of the coordinated hatred from a group of unemployed women, mentally ill men, or cowardly, unmanly men is well aware of how glass ceilings, dog whistles, and microaggressions actually work. The girls and crazies and girlish cowards never confront you directly, never criticize your work directly, but they giggle and offer insults in the form of indirect symbols whose symbolic value they themselves never publicly admit. They anonymously feed stories to a compliant press. They cheer wildly for things which seem to have no meaning, since they are actually cheering for something else. And they fix the votes or fix the game, all the while accusing you of doing the same. Please note the three fields where this is rampant: the theater, the academic world, and the halls of power. Places where no one is judged on his work, only on his connections. Places where incompetents prosper. These are the places where the left is paramount. In sum, the secret conspiracy of oppressors we hear the left endlessly bewailing exists, if at all, only among them, and only to impress those who do not conform to their narrative. Like Hollywood starlets forced into prostitution with overweight producers to win desirable billings, who then complain about a patriarchy and a rape culture, the leftists who whine about glass ceilings and dog whistles are speaking of a world which they built for themselves, as a prison for themselves, which they fear to blame on themselves. And so they blame it on those of us who hold their only hope for liberation. At this point, the candid reader might be thinking, if glass ceilings, dog whistles, and microaggressions are by definition invisible, inaudible, and impalpable, on what grounds does anyone assert that they actually exist? Well, the left answers this question by shrieking like insane baboons if anyone raises it, slandering and libel anyone who questions this or any part of their dogma, and attempting to ruin his livelihood and life. This will deter the question from being asked. The left will not answer the question, of course, because there is no answer. Leftism does not require grounds to make assertions. Only in logical and rigorous forms of thought, as in legal or scientific reason, is precedent or observation or some other form of support offered to uphold an assertion. In leftist thoughts, statements are not statements of fact, they are statements of power. There is a famous Chinese story of a time when a vizier, thinking the emperor weak, and wishing to find out which courtiers would join him in rebellion, brought a deer into the court, displayed it to the courtiers, and called it a horse. The emperor politely corrected him, and some courtiers agreed with the emperor. The vizier noted who these were, and later had them assassinated, exiled, or executed. Hence, if a Chinese vizier points at a deer and decrees it to be a horse, the other courtiers who agree with him agree because they fear or admire his power. Those who disagree expect their disagreement to be taken as an act of defiance. The courtiers who say deer are in the vizier's camp and have expressed their loyalty. Those who say horse are his foes and have expressed their loyalty. Whether or not a horse is a horse never enters into the matter. Likewise, in leftist thoughts, statements are neither true nor false. True and false are properties that only have a place in describing statements related to reality. The sun rises in the east is a statement, for example, that is true, but if the sun ever were to rise in the west, would be false. Bow to the idol is not a statement that can be either true or false. It is not a statement at all, but an imperative. It is a demand for loyalty. But this is not the whole explanation. The Chinese vizier in the old story did not, after all, point to a gelding and call it a stallion, nor point to a slow horse and call it a fast horse. He did not demand the courtiers say something haste or bad judgment might allow them honestly to believe. He demanded the courtiers say an obvious, blatant, and unambiguous lie. Men place their flags on a flagpole so that they are above all obstructions and are clear to see. The lie must be obvious, insolent in its disregard for the truth, so that the falsehood is clear for all to see. What kind of loyalty is being demanded? The left-wing narrative is not merely a political theory, nor merely a worldview. It is an ideology. The difference between an ideology and a worldview is this. A worldview is written in the indicative mood. A worldview can be summed up in a list of statements which one believes to be true or false. An ideology is written in the imperative mood. It can only be summed up as a list of duties and prohibitions. An ideology is a heresy of Christian thought disguised as political or economic policy. An ideology by its nature is something like a glass ceiling and a dog whistle, because it is a phantom that seems to be talking about one thing, but is actually talking about something else. I say it is a Christian heresy because ideology is a parasite on the church. There are no Buddhist nor Shinto ideologies. I use the word heresy advisedly. A heresy is an act of taking one branch of an organic whole of thought, ignoring its roots and consequences, inflating or elevating that branch out of its proper context, and then using that branch as a bludgeon to pummel all other branches of the teaching into silence. For example, the Pelagian heresy took the doctrine of the free will of man to undermine the doctrine of the fall of man. Likewise, Calvinism takes the doctrine of the omniscience of God to undermine the doctrine of the free will of man. In the modern world, all ideologues, starting with the French revolutionaries and up through the cultural Marxists and social justice warriors of the present day, take the doctrine of compassion for the poor and the needy and the oppressed and downtrodden, and the doctrine that God is no respecter of persons, and they use that as a bludgeon to undermine the doctrine of the fall of man. Like the Pelagians, they take the heresy that man is perfectible. Man is to be saved not through Christ, but through Caesar. That is, through the alleged application of scientific reasoning to political and economic institutions. Man is naturally good and improvable, and naturally will evolve into utopian perfection once certain artificial sources of institutional evildoing and oppression are swept away, such as private property, inequality of income, or unconscious racism. Heresies are also simplistic. They are, as mentioned, a reduction of an organic and balanced system of thought into a few unbalanced and simple-minded slogans. Likewise, an ideology is a one-size-fits-all answer for all of life's complex problems. Black and white with no colors, no balancing act, no counting of costs versus benefits, no understanding of the tragic view of life. Conservatism, seen in this light, is not an ideology at all, for it regards the state merely as one social institution among many, and not the sole, nor even the primary institution of civilization. To the conservative, the state is an institution used to maintain law and order, to enforce contracts, to encourage virtue, and to defend from invasion and trespass against our natural God-given rights. To the conservative, the free market is an institution for the exchange of goods and services peacefully. Marriage is the institution for raising the young and building communities. The church is the institution for prayer and sacrifice and learning the meaning of life. The arts are institutions for expressing the glory of nature and of nature's great author, and so on. Each institution has its proper and organic place in the organism of society, and certain personal matters are beyond the reach of any institution. But the heresy of ideology says all these things are submissive to Caesar. Marriage is subordinate to the state. The free market is subordinate to the state. The church is most certainly subordinate to the state. All things serve the state, and even what thoughts are allowed or are forbidden to be expressed in public or private, conscious or unconscious, is subservient to the state. Ideology says all things are political matters, hence within Caesar's purview. Ironically, because ideologies are simplistic, one-sided, and false, they all fail at what they attempt. Marxism says that one can produce abundant wealth by eliminating all incentives to create wealth. Cultural Marxism says women can gain equality by helpless dependence upon the state. Blacks can gain equality by aggravating the mildest dispute with whites, and homosexuals can gain love and approval for their lifestyle by savagely demonizing the vast majority of straights and rejecting all attempts at peaceful coexistence with them. The success rate of socialism, with between 100 million and 150 million innocent men, women, and children murdered, at producing peace and plenty is obvious to all but the willfully blind. By the nature of ideology, the ideologue is and must be willfully blind. Never to cast doubt on the list of imperatives that comprises his ideology is one of the imperatives. To entertain any doubt, or to hear any debate, on any topic under the control of the ideologue is thought crime. To doubt that America is racist is itself racism. To doubt any iota of the shrieking nonsense uttered by feminists is itself sexism, and so on. Because they are blind, the natural limits of reality which cause the failure of their ideological cloud cuckoo land theories are invisible to them. Always never the ideologue will run into a boundary or barrier that halts his upward progress, which, always never, he will not permit himself to see. To him it will be invisible. A glass ceiling. Because they have left the realm of reason and reality, the ideologue is never talking about the ostensible topic of your debate with him when you debate with him. For example, suppose that after a horrific mass shooting you want to debate a proper response to see it's not to happen again. Naturally, you wonder about the foolish left-wing policy that prevents locking patients with dangerous insanities up in an asylum. But this is never discussed. The ideologue can only discuss, with ever-increasing shrillness, frustration, and fury, as he beats against an invisible glass ceiling of failure, his hope that by taking guns away from sane and law-abiding citizens, somehow, by unicorn-powered fairy glitter magic, the guns will vanish from the hands of the insane and the criminal. When you point out that unicorns do not exist, hence cannot make guns vanish, he responds by saying that you are aiding and abetting the murders. He is frustrating because he is pounding against the glass ceiling. Gun control laws cannot produce the unicorn glitter happy land results he imagined. Gun control laws produce Chicagoland murder rates. You think you are talking about gun control if you debate him. You are really talking about whether the government can solve the problem of evil. Hence, this discussion is a dog whistle. That is, it is a conversation meant for the ears of his compatriots alone, which has a second meaning inaudible to normal people. He cannot and dare not say aloud what he's actually thinking, because were he to say it, the falsehood and fatuous fat-headedness of the whole sacred list of his ideological imperatives would stand naked to the mocking gaze of reality. Fear prevents him from speaking. His ideological system cannot work and never will because, fundamentally, it is false to facts. To believe a fact because it is factual is something his moral code calls wrong, and calls a hate crime. See, for example, crime rates among blacks. To believe a falsehood because it is false, on the other hand, and the more outrageous falsehood the better, is something his moral code rewards as a sign of absolute party loyalty. See, for example, evidence for man-made global warming. And so reality irks him with countless tiny splinters of fact under his fingernails. No program ever seems to go right. The feminist is angered that men do not use their superior power over women to impose equality on women as a gift. The black riders demand police abandon their neighborhoods to crime, and then are angered when the crime rate goes up. It is a tiny, endless stream of buried and inaudible slights and slanders against the pretension of the ideologues. For the ideologue, then, reality itself is an endless microaggression. In reaction, the ideologue utters tiny and invisible insults against everyone around him. His continuous sniping, snarking, snarling, and risible pose of moral and mental superiority to all men is his retaliation to the mockery reality makes of his stillborn dreams. So the world of phantoms is the world in which the left-winger actually lives. All about him is a hidden and apparently all-powerful foe. The foe taunts and mocks him and eludes his grasp. The foe is everywhere and nowhere. Normal conversations between normal men now sound like the murmurings of conspirators. Facts and reality form invisible ceilings to progress. Gnat clouds of endless failures and insults accompany every moment. Everything actually is controlled by glass ceilings, dog whistles, and microaggressions. The problem is that all these phantoms are all produced by the ideologue himself. They form the thought prison in which he is trapped. They are the false narrative to which he is addicted and which is slowly killing him, brain first. Granted, the ideologue placed fetters on his own limbs with his own hands, and like Oedipus, with his own thumbs drove out the eyes of common sense. He castrated his own conscience, he lobotomized his own reason, and he drove a stake through the heart of compassion and humanity in his own breast. We must pity the fool, suicidal fool, even as we condemn his suicide. The pain he suffers is real, even if the phantoms he imagines to be causing it are no more than shadows in a looking glass. The war with phantoms is real, even if the phantoms are not real. It falls to us to undo all the damage this madness has caused. Ask not whether it is fair that the task is ours. The hard fact is that if we do not bind up the wounds to civilization he makes, those wounds will not be healed. He blames us for his problems. We cannot salve his brow or solve his woe. His problem is spiritual, but his Savior is not Caesar.